The stars were beautiful from the bridge of the bright horizon. Captain Minho had dreamed of this moment his whole life. Humanity was finally reaching out to the galaxy, ready to meet other intelligent species and join the cosmic community. His ship was the first to travel this far from Earth, and every day brought new discoveries. Today would be different from what he expected. The alarm sounded across the bridge. 3 unknown ships had appeared on their sensors. They were massive, at least twice the size of any human vessel. Their design was aggressive, all sharp angles and weapon ports. "Open a channel," Minho ordered. His heart was beating fast, but he kept his voice steady. This was first contact. Everything humanity did in the next few minutes would set the tone for their relationship with these aliens. The screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was not friendly. It was reptilian, covered in dark scales that looked like natural armor. Golden eyes stared at Minho with something that looked like hunger. The creature's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I am Commander Vrextal of the Calrix Empire," the alien said. His voice was deep and filled with confidence. "Your ship will surrender immediately. Your species will submit to Calrix rule. This is not a request." Minho felt his stomach tighten. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. "I am Captain Minho of the United Earth Fleet. We come in peace. We want to establish friendly relations with your empire." Vrextal laughed. The sound made everyone on the bridge uncomfortable. "Peace, you misunderstand your situation, human. We are predators. You are prey. The strong rule. The weak serve. These are the laws of nature. Look at yourself. You are small. You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. You were born to be conquered." "We're not interested in being conquered," Minho said carefully. "We're not your enemy. There's no reason for conflict between our species." The Calrix commander leaned closer to his screen. His golden eyes studied Minho like a cat watching a mouse. "You refuse to surrender? How interesting. Tell me, human, what happens when prey refuses to run from a predator?" Before Minho could answer, his tactical officer shouted in alarm. "Captain, they're firing on the New Dawn!" Minho spun toward the tactical display. The New Dawn was a colony ship, carrying 30,000 civilians to a new world. It had no weapons, no military purpose. It was just families hoping to start a new life. The Calrix ships opened fire without warning. Their weapons cut through the colony ship's shields like they were made of paper. The New Dawn tried to turn, tried to run, but it was too slow and too big. Within seconds, the ship exploded in a ball of fire. 30,000 people, men, women, children, all dead in an instant. The bridge of the bright horizon went silent. Everyone stared at the screens in shock. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. "Consider that a lesson," Vrextal said calmly. "This is what happens to species that refuse Calrix rule. Now will you surrender?" Minho felt rage burning inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Get us out of here," he said quietly to his navigator. "Maximum speed. Jump as soon as we're clear." The bright horizon turned and ran. Calrix ships pursued them, firing as they came. The human ships' shields held, but barely. They made it to the jump point with seconds to spare, disappearing into faster-than-light travel, just as a Calrix missile passed through the space they had occupied. On Earth, Admiral Hana sat in her office when the emergency call came through. She was a career military officer, a veteran of conflicts that seemed small now. She had thought humanity was ready for anything. She was wrong. The report from Captain Minho was brief and terrible. First contact had been made. 30,000 civilians were dead. The aliens called themselves the Calrix, and they intended to conquer humanity. Hana called an emergency session of the United Earth Council. Representatives from every nation gathered in hours. The debate was loud and angry. Some wanted immediate retaliation. Others wanted to try diplomacy again. A few suggested preparing to surrender to avoid more deaths. Hana let them argue for an hour. Then she stood, and the room fell silent. "We need to face the facts," she said. "The Calrix have better technology, stronger ships, more advanced weapons. They've been traveling the stars for thousands of years while we've barely left our solar system. In a straight fight, they will destroy us." "Then what do we do?" someone asked. "We don't give them a straight fight," Hana replied. She pulled up everything they knew about the Calrix from Minho's scans. "They're physically stronger than us. They have natural armor and regeneration. They're built to be predators, but predators have weaknesses. They're overconfident. They expect their prey to be afraid. They've won so many times that they've forgotten how to fight an enemy that doesn't play by their rules. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we teach them that humans are not prey, Hana said. We can't beat them with strength, so we beat them with strategy, adaptation, and sheer stubbornness. We make every victory cost them so much that eventually they'll decide we're not worth conquering. Far away in the heart of the Calrix Empire, the military high command barely noticed humanity. The reports described them as another weak species ripe for conquest. Small bodies, no natural weapons, primitive technology. They would fall quickly like hundreds of species before them. 3 weeks to complete conquest, a general estimated. Perhaps 4 if they're particularly stubborn. The Empress approved the invasion without much thought. It would be quick and easy, just another addition to their empire. They had no idea they were about to face something they had never encountered before. An enemy that refused to quit. The Calrix invasion fleet arrived at Arcturus Prime exactly on schedule. The human mining colony was small, home to about 5,000 people and defended by only 200 soldiers. It should have been an easy victory. The Calrix had crushed larger colonies in less time. Lieutenant Jiho watched the alien warships descend through the atmosphere. He was young for a military commander, only 28 years old. He had never fought in a real war before. None of them had. Humanity had enjoyed peace for decades. That peace was over now. "Sir, what are our orders?" his sergeant asked. Jiho looked at the message from Earth Command one more time. It was simple. Delay the enemy. Buy time for civilians to evacuate. Hold as long as possible. They all knew what that meant. Hold until you die. We're not going to fight them head on, Jiho said. Get everyone into the mining tunnels. We're going to make them work for this colony. The mining tunnels ran deep under the surface, a maze that the colonists knew by heart. Jiho's soldiers had spent the last week preparing. They had planted mines at key locations, set up ambush points, prepared traps that would make the Calrix pay for every meter they advanced. The Calrix dropships landed in the main square. 400 soldiers emerged, each one standing 9 feet tall in combat armor. They carried weapons that could punch through concrete. They expected the humans to either surrender or mount a desperate defense. They found neither. The colony appeared abandoned. Streets were empty. Buildings were silent. The Calrix commander felt suspicious. Prey always defended their nests. Where were the humans? Spread out, he ordered. Search every structure. Find them. The Calrix soldiers moved through the empty streets in formation. They were disciplined and confident. They had done this hundreds of times on hundreds of worlds. It was always the same. The prey hid, then surrendered when they realized resistance was hopeless. The first explosion came from under a squad near the central plaza. 3 Calrix soldiers died instantly, their armor shredded by the blast. Before anyone could react, a second mine detonated on the opposite side of the square, then a third. The Calrix formation broke apart in confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. Prey didn't use traps. Prey ran or fought. They didn't turn their own homes into weapons. From hidden positions in the buildings, human snipers opened fire. They didn't waste shots on the heavily armored Calrix soldiers. Instead, they targeted equipment, communication devices, weapon systems, power packs, anything that would disable the enemy without requiring a lucky shot through their armor. The Calrix tried to return fire, but the humans were already gone. They shot and moved, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. It was guerrilla warfare, and the Calrix had no training for it. Hours passed. The Calrix controlled the surface of the colony, but they had lost 60 soldiers. 60! Against primitive humans who should have died in the first assault. Jiho watched from the tunnel entrance. His force had lost 20 soldiers, but they had done far more damage than anyone expected. More importantly, they had bought time. The civilian evacuation ships had escaped hours ago. Fall back to Section 7, he ordered. Prepare to collapse the tunnels. His remaining soldiers retreated deep underground. Behind them, they triggered charges that brought tons of rock down on the tunnel entrances. The Calrix would take the colony, but they would gain nothing but ruins. On Earth, Chief Engineer Yuna worked day and night in her laboratory. She studied every piece of Calrix technology they had recovered. Every scan, every sensor reading. She was looking for weaknesses. What she found was interesting. The Calrix technology was advanced but not magical. Their tactics were straightforward and predictable. They always attacked directly. They always relied on superior strength. They had never needed to develop clever strategies because they had never faced an enemy that could match them. They're arrogant, Yuna told Admiral Hana during a video call. They've won so many times that they've forgotten how to adapt. She showed Hana the battle data from Arcturus Prime. Lieutenant Jiho's small force had inflicted 10 Calrix casualties for every human death. In 3,000 years of Calrix military history, that ratio was unheard of. They can be beaten, Yuna said. Not in direct combat, but if we force them to fight on our terms, in environments we choose using tactics they don't understand, we have a chance. Hana studied the data carefully. An idea was forming in her mind. A dangerous idea, but possibly their only hope. 3 weeks later, the Calrix Second Fleet arrived at Kepler Station, humanity's largest orbital facility. 200 Calrix warships against 30 human vessels. The outcome seemed obvious. Admiral Hana commanded the defense from her flagship. She watched the Calrix fleet approach in their standard formation, proud, confident, expecting easy victory. All ships, she ordered calmly. Execute retreat pattern Delta. Lead them into the debris field. The human ships turned and ran immediately. The Calrix pursued eagerly. They saw it as prey behavior, running from predators. They didn't realize it was bait. The debris field was the remains of old mining operations. Thousands of metal fragments, dead satellites and broken asteroids floating in a dense cloud. The human ships knew safe paths through it. The Calrix didn't. Hidden among the debris were mines, automated weapons platforms, remote-controlled missiles, all waiting silently. When the Calrix fleet was deep in the field, Hana gave the signal. The debris field came alive with weapons fire. Mines detonated next to Calrix ships. Hidden platforms emerged and fired at point-blank range. Human vessels appeared from behind cover, fired their weapons, then disappeared again. The Calrix tried to fight back, but they couldn't see their enemies clearly. Their sensors were confused by all the debris. Their big ships couldn't maneuver in the tight spaces. Their traditional tactics were useless. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 80 Calrix ships were destroyed or too damaged to fight. The surviving vessels retreated from human space. It was the first Calrix retreat in 3,000 years of recorded history. Commander Vrextal received the battle report with disbelief. His second fleet had run away. Run away from prey! How is this possible? He demanded. His tactical officer had no good answer. They don't fight with honor, Commander. They use traps and ambushes. They refuse direct combat. They turn their environment into a weapon. Vrextal felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. Maybe these humans were more dangerous than they appeared. 6 months into the war, the Calrix Empire controlled 12 human colonies. On paper, they were winning. In reality, they were bleeding resources and morale with every passing day. Sergeant Tay moved silently through the ruins of New Seoul's commercial district. The Calrix had conquered this colony in just 3 days, expecting the humans to accept occupation like every other species they had defeated. But humans didn't accept occupation. They resisted. Tay led a resistance cell of 5 people. They were all that remained of the colony's defense force. They wore civilian clothes and carried homemade weapons. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were something the Calrix had never faced before. They were ghosts who refused to die. Target approaching, his radio whispered. It was Juan, a former engineer who now spent his days hacking Calrix computer systems from a basement hideout. Tai watched through his scope as a Calrix supply convoy moved down the street. Food, ammunition, medical supplies. Everything the occupation force needed to maintain control. The convoy was heavily guarded, surrounded by automated defenses. A direct attack would be suicide. Tay had no intention of attacking directly. Instead, his team had spent days planting tiny devices along the convoy's route. Not bombs, something more subtle. Each device would emit a specific frequency that interfered with Calrix navigation systems. The convoy's automated vehicles would receive false guidance data. They would think they were on the correct route, while actually driving into a dead-end district filled with unstable buildings. Tay and his team were already gone by the time the convoy realized something was wrong. The automated trucks crashed into each other in confusion. Buildings damaged by earlier fighting collapsed on top of the vehicles. By the time Calrix recovery teams arrived, half the supplies were destroyed or buried. It was the 47th attack that week. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that looked like organized resistance. Just a constant stream of small failures that forced the Calrex to spend more and more resources maintaining control of a single planet. The Calrex garrison commander stared at his damage reports in frustration. Every day brought new problems. Power failures, water treatment breakdowns, communication glitches, transport malfunctions. His superiors demanded he maintain order, but he was running out of soldiers and equipment. "We need reinforcements," he told the fleet command. "This planet requires 3 times the normal occupation force." That was the problem happening across all 12 occupied worlds. The Calrex were winning battles but losing the war. Every conquered planet became a resource drain instead of a source of strength. On Earth, Dr. Nari made a breakthrough that would change everything. She was studying Calrex biology from samples taken during battles. The Calrex could heal from terrible wounds, their bodies regenerating tissue at incredible speeds. But Nari discovered the limitation. Their regeneration requires high oxygen and high gravity, she explained to Admiral Hana. The Calrex evolved on a heavy world with thick atmosphere. In different conditions, their healing slows down dramatically. In some environments, it stops completely. "So if we fight them in low gravity or thin atmosphere?" Hana asked. "They lose their main advantage," Nari confirmed. "A wound that would heal in hours might take days. They become vulnerable." This information spread to every human military unit. Suddenly, humans started choosing battlefields carefully. They fought on low-gravity moons, on planets with thin atmospheres, in space stations with controlled environments. Anywhere that weakened Calrex regeneration. Commander Sora specialized in hit-and-run attacks. Her fleet would jump into a Calrex-controlled system, destroy a few targets, then jump out before the enemy could respond. She never stayed to fight a pitched battle. She just hit them over and over, forcing them to chase her across space. The Calrex hated this style of warfare. It was dishonorable, cowardly, but it was working. Every time they sent ships to chase Sora's fleet, those ships weren't available for other duties. Every time they repaired damage from her raids, they used resources needed elsewhere. In one memorable battle, Sora led Calrex ships to a moon with 1/3 standard gravity. The Calrex soldiers, evolved for heavy gravity, moved slowly and clumsily. When they were wounded, their bodies couldn't heal properly. Human Marines trained for low-gravity combat tore through them with shocking ease. The Calrex military machine was straining. Their economy had shifted entirely to military production. Factories that once made consumer goods now produced only weapons. Food was rationed. Resources were redirected to the war effort. The species they had conquered were watching carefully. For the first time in thousands of years, the mighty Calrex looked weak. On the Calrex homeworld, Commander Vrextal studied tactical displays in the Imperial War Room. He had been promoted to Supreme Fleet Commander, responsible for defeating humanity. It should have been an honor. Instead, it felt like being given an impossible task. "We control their colonies," his aide reported, "but we cannot hold them efficiently. Each occupied world requires 2 or 3 times the normal garrison. We're losing more ships to harassment attacks than to actual battles. The humans are everywhere and nowhere." Vrextal understood the problem. Humanity was fighting a different kind of war. They didn't defend territory. They didn't care about honor or glory. They only cared about surviving and making the Calrex pay for every victory. "We need a decisive battle," Vrextal said. "Something that will break their spirit and end this war." He pulled up a star chart and pointed to one system. Sol, Earth's home system. The human capital world. "We will gather our full strength," he declared. "Every available ship. Every soldier. We will strike at their heart and crush them completely. Once their government falls, their resistance will collapse." It was traditional Calrex strategy. Overwhelming force. Complete destruction. It had worked for 3,000 years against every other species. Vrextal began assembling what he called the Grand Armada. 60% of the entire Calrex fleet. Thousands of ships. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers. It would be the largest military force ever assembled by any species in the galaxy. "In 3 months, we jump to Earth," he announced to his officers. "We will end this war and teach the galaxy what happens to species that resist Calrex rule." His officers cheered. Finally, a proper battle. Finally, a chance to restore their honor and prove Calrex superiority. None of them suspected that humanity was counting on exactly this response. None of them realized they were walking into the biggest trap ever set. Commander Wu worked in the intelligence division. a world of secrets and lies. His job was to make enemies believe what humanity wanted them to believe. Today he was planting information that would decide the fate of the war. "Is the false data ready?" he asked his team. A young officer nodded. "Yes, sir. We've placed it in 3 separate Calrix communication networks. They'll think it's their own intelligence reports." The false information painted a specific picture. Earth's defenses were failing. Military production had fallen. The government was divided and weak. Humanity was ready to surrender. They just needed one final push to break completely. Wu knew the Calrix would believe it. They wanted to believe it. Predators couldn't resist wounded prey. "Send it," he ordered. The false intelligence reached Calrix command within hours. Their analysts studied it eagerly. Finally, proof that the humans were breaking. The Grand Armada would arrive at the perfect moment to deliver the killing blow. Supreme Fleet Commander Vrextal read the reports with satisfaction. "Begin final preparations. In 2 weeks we jump to Sol and end this war." What Vrextal didn't know was that Earth wasn't humanity's real target. While he prepared to attack Sol, Captain Minho was preparing something entirely different. Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at a star chart. Behind him floated 300 human warships. Every combat vessel humanity could spare. They represented humanity's real striking force. "All ships ready, sir," Lieutenant Ara reported. "Then let's move," Minho said quietly. "Set course for the Calrix homeworld." The human fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel. Their timing was perfect. The Grand Armada was already committed to attacking Sol. By the time the Calrix realized humanity's true plan, it would be too late to stop it. On Earth, Admiral Hana walked through the command center, making final checks. The Sol system had been transformed over the past months. Every planet, moon, and asteroid had been weaponized. But not in the way anyone expected. The Calrix like direct combat, she explained to her officers. They'll jump in expecting to find our fleet waiting for battle. Instead, they'll find themselves in a maze designed to kill them slowly. The system had been set up with careful precision. Automated weapons platforms hidden among asteroids. Missiles buried on moons. Railguns on Mars and Venus. Defensive satellites in carefully calculated orbits. Every path toward Earth led through overlapping kill zones. "We're not trying to stop them," Hana continued. "We're trying to make them bleed for every meter they advance. By the time they reach Earth, they'll be so damaged they won't be able to fight." Her second-in-command, Commander Sora, studied the battle plan with admiration. "You've turned the entire system into a weapon." "Because we can't beat them in a fair fight," Hana replied. "So we won't give them a fair fight." The Grand Armada jumped into Sol system exactly on schedule. Vrextal stood on his flagship's bridge, surrounded by displays showing thousands of Calrix ships. It was beautiful, powerful, unstoppable. "Scan for human fleet," he ordered. "No major fleet detected," his sensor officer reported. "But sir, I'm reading thousands of automated defenses." "And the planetary positions?" "They've been moved into offensive formations." Vrextal felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't a defensive formation. This was a trap. "All ships advance toward Earth," he ordered anyway. "Destroy everything in your path." The Grand Armada moved forward and hell broke loose. Automated drones swarmed from the asteroid belt in waves that never ended. The Calrix destroyed hundreds, but thousands more appeared. Mars opened fire with weapons that had been charging for months. Venus launched missiles from hidden silos. Every moon in the system became a firing platform. But the worst part was the kill zones. Every time the Calrix fleet advanced, they had to pass through corridors where human weapons could hit them from multiple directions. Ships died in crossfire from enemies they couldn't see. The further they pushed toward Earth, the more concentrated the defenses became. "This isn't a battle," Vrextal said in horror. "This is a slaughter." Meanwhile, Captain Minho's fleet arrived at the Calrix homeworld. The defenders there were minimal. Most of the fleet had been sent to attack Earth. Only a few hundred ships remained to protect the Empire's heart. Minho opened a communication channel that broadcast to the entire planet. "This is Captain Minho of Earth. Your Grand Armada is dying in our home system. We now have the power to destroy your homeworld. Surrender your military completely, or we show you the same mercy you showed our civilians." The remaining Calrix defenders attacked immediately. They were brave and skilled, but they were outnumbered badly. Minho's fleet cut through them in less than an hour. Then Engineer Yuna activated the weapon she had designed. Satellites deployed around the planet. each one releasing specific chemicals into the atmosphere. They were changing the air composition, slowly reducing oxygen levels. Pandora satellites active, Una reported. In 72 hours, the changes will be permanent. The atmosphere will become toxic to Calric's biology. Minho watched the displays with a heavy heart. He had the power to commit genocide, to wipe out billions of Calric civilians who had nothing to do with their government's decisions. It would be justice for the 30,000 humans murdered at the start of the war, but it would also make humanity into the monsters they had been fighting against. Lieutenant Ara spoke quietly. "Sir, we can stop this. We can deactivate the satellites." Minho looked at his crew. They had all lost friends and family to Calric's attacks. They had every reason to want revenge, but revenge wasn't the same as justice. "Open a channel to the Calric's government," Minho ordered. "Tell them they have 72 hours to surrender completely. Full disarmament, freedom for all conquered species, war crime trials. If they agree, we stop the satellites. If they refuse, their world dies." In Sol System, Hana made a similar offer to Vrextal. "You came to destroy Earth. Instead, you're dying in our trap. Retreat now and we let you live. Stay and die to the last ship. Your choice." Both human commanders had made the same decision. Offer mercy to an enemy that had shown them none. It was a gamble. The Calrics might choose death over surrender, but humanity had learned something the Calrics never had. True strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about choosing mercy when you had the power to destroy. Supreme Fleet Commander Vrextal stared at the tactical display. His Grand Armada was trapped in Sol System, bleeding ships with every passing hour. The humans had turned their entire home system into a weapon, and his proud fleet was dying slowly in their trap. "Commander, we've lost 35% of the fleet," his aide reported. "We can push through to Earth, but our losses will be severe." Vrextal felt something he had never experienced in his long military career. Fear. Not for himself, but for his people. If the Grand Armada died here, the Calric's empire would be defenseless against the humans and every other species they had conquered. Admiral Hana's voice came through the communication channel. "Commander Vrextal, you have a choice. Order your fleet to retreat and survive, or stay and watch them all die. We're not interested in destroying you. We just want this war to end." "You fight like cowards," Vrextal said bitterly, hiding behind automated weapons, refusing direct combat. "We fight to survive," Hana replied calmly. "There's no honor in dying for a war that shouldn't have started. Your Empress wanted to conquer us. We're proving why that was a mistake. Leave now while you still can." On the Calric's homeworld, Empress Calitha stood before her war council. The news from both fronts was devastating. The Grand Armada was trapped and dying. The human fleet had control of their homeworld. Satellites were slowly poisoning the atmosphere. "We must fight," one general shouted. "The Calrics have never surrendered. The Calrics have never faced extinction before," a quieter voice said. Everyone turned to look at Threxel, a young diplomatic officer. He was considered odd by Calric standards because he believed in studying other species instead of just conquering them. "The humans could have destroyed our homeworld already," Threxel continued. "They have us completely at their mercy, but they're offering us terms instead of death. Why would they do that if they're just prey?" "Because they're weak," the general snarled. "No," Threxel said. "Because they're thinking ahead. They know that destroying us would make them like us. And they know a defeated enemy who chooses peace is better than a destroyed enemy who creates endless revenge." The Empress had ruled for 50 years. She had led the Calrics to countless victories, but she was wise enough to recognize when a war was lost. "Open a channel to the human fleet," she ordered. "I will speak with them." Captain Minho received the transmission in his quarters. He had been watching the countdown timer obsessively. 68 hours remained until the atmospheric changes became permanent. 68 hours until billions of Calrics died. "This is Empress Calitha," the voice said through the translator. "You have requested negotiations. I am willing to discuss your terms." Relief flooded through Minho. "Thank you, Empress. We'll arrange a neutral meeting location." The negotiations took place on a small moon between the two fleets. Commander Sora led the human delegation, along with diplomats who had prepared for this moment for months. The Calrics brought their war council, and the young officer Threxel Sora laid out humanity's demands. Complete military disarmament of the Calrics Empire, freedom for all conquered species, technology and resources to repair war damage, War crime trials for those who murdered civilians. A permanent human military presence in Calric space to ensure compliance. The Calrix Council erupted in angry protests. These weren't terms of peace. These were terms of total defeat. You murdered 30,000 of our civilians without warning, Sora said firmly. You invaded our worlds and called us prey. Now you're learning that prey can fight back. These terms are not negotiable. Accept them, or your homeworld becomes uninhabitable in 68 hours. You would kill billions of innocent people, a Calrix general demanded. Would you prefer we do what you did to us? Sora replied. Destroy your world without mercy? We're offering you a choice you never gave us. Take it or refuse it, but decide quickly. Threxel spoke up. We attacked humanity because we thought they were weak. We were wrong. They survived our first assault. They adapted to our tactics. They turned our strengths against us. And now, when they could easily destroy us, they offer terms. That's not weakness. That's true strength. You would have us surrender everything? Another Calrix officer growled. I would have us survive, Threxel said. We've spent 3,000 years conquering. We forgot that real survival isn't about dominating others. These humans should be extinct. Instead, they're about to reshape the entire galaxy. Maybe we need to learn from them instead of fighting them. The council chamber fell silent. The truth was harsh, but it was truth. The Empress looked at Sora with tired eyes. If we accept these terms, what happens to our people? They live, Sora said. They rebuild. They learn to exist in the galaxy as equals instead of rulers. And maybe in time they learn that cooperation works better than conquest. And if we refuse, then your homeworld dies, your empire collapses, and history remembers the Calrix as the species that chose pride over survival. In Sol System, Vrextal made his decision. The Grand Armada was dying. Half his ships were damaged or destroyed. Earth still stood untouched. There was no victory here, only degrees of defeat. He opened a channel to Admiral Hana. We are withdrawing. But know this, human. You did not defeat us through strength or honor. You defeated us through trickery and cowardice. Call it whatever makes you feel better, Hana replied. You attacked us. We survived. We won. That's all that matters. The Grand Armada began its retreat, limping out of Sol System like wounded animals. It was the first Calrix retreat in 3,000 years of military history. Every species in the galaxy would hear about this moment. On the Calrix homeworld, Empress Cal-Etha stared at the terms one final time. Everything her people were, everything they had built for millennia would change. But they would survive. She picked up the signing device. Her hand trembled. We accept your terms, she said quietly. Captain Minho immediately ordered the Pandora satellites deactivated. The atmospheric changes stopped with hours to spare. The Calrix homeworld was saved, the war was over. Humanity had won. Not through superior weapons or technology, but through refusing to give up and choosing mercy over vengeance when it mattered most. Now came the harder part, building peace from the ashes. 3 weeks after the Calrix surrender, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for the Treaty of Sol signing ceremony. It was a historic moment. The species that had ruled through fear for 3,000 years was bending its knee to humanity. Captain Minho stood in the Great Hall wearing his dress uniform. He felt uncomfortable with all the attention. He was a soldier, not a politician. But the diplomats insisted that the people who won the war should be present when peace was signed. Empress Cal-Etha entered with her remaining council members. She looked different now, smaller, less confident. The weight of defeat showed in every movement. Behind her walked Threxel, the young officer who had argued for peace. The terms were read aloud for everyone to hear. The Calrix military would be reduced to defensive forces only. All conquered species would be freed immediately. The Calrix would share technology with humanity to help rebuild damaged worlds. Those responsible for war crimes would face trial. When the time came to sign, the Empress hesitated. This was the moment when 3 millennia of Calrix dominance officially ended. Her hand shook as she pressed her seal to the document. Then it was done. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 months later, the war crimes trials began on Earth. Supreme Fleet Commander Vrextal stood in a human courtroom, facing charges for ordering the destruction of the colony ship and overseeing brutal occupations. The prosecutor showed footage of the destroyed New Dawn. 30,000 civilian lives ended in seconds without warning. The courtroom went silent watching the recording. What do you have to say in your defense? The judge asked, Vrextal stood tall, his scales gleaming under the courtroom lights. I followed the traditions of my people. We are predators. That is our nature. Should a tiger apologize for hunting? You're not a tiger, the prosecutor said. You're an intelligent being capable of making choices. You chose to murder civilians. You can't hide behind nature when you had the intelligence to choose differently. Vrextal had no response. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. He would spend his remaining years in a cell, a reminder of what happens when predators forget that prey can fight back. But not all Calrics followed Vrextal's path. Threxel worked hard to reform his people's culture. He traveled to Calrics' worlds giving speeches about adaptation and cooperation. We thought being apex predators made us superior, he told crowds of young Calrics. We were wrong. Humanity taught us that true survival comes from adapting to challenges, not dominating others. They should be extinct. Instead, they defeated us. That's real strength. Many older Calrics rejected his message, but younger ones listened. They had watched their mighty empire broken by a species they were taught to see as prey. That kind of lesson changed everything. On New Sol, Sergeant Tay helped rebuild what the occupation destroyed. Calrics and human workers labored side by side, clearing rubble and repairing buildings. The hatred hadn't disappeared completely, but people were trying. One day, a young Calric soldier approached Tay nervously. I was part of the occupation here, he said in broken human language. I want to apologize. Tay looked at him for a long moment. This soldier was barely an adult. He probably didn't want to be part of an invasion any more than Tay wanted to fight a war. Apologies are easy, Tay said. Show me through actions. The young Calrics nodded and returned to work. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. Dr. Nari received the Nobel Prize for her xenobiology research. During her acceptance speech, she talked about how science could serve both war and peace. I studied Calric's biology to find weaknesses we could exploit, she said. Now I study it to help them adapt to new environments. Science is a tool. What matters is how we choose to use it. Her current research helped Calric's population settle on worlds with different atmospheres and gravity levels. As their empire fragmented, many Calrics needed new homes. Humanity's former enemy had become humanity's responsibility. Engineer Una shut down the Pandora satellites around the Calric's homeworld. The atmosphere had recovered, but the satellites remained as monuments. Reminders of how close the Calrics came to extinction. Why did you stop them? A Calric scientist asked Una as they worked together. You could have killed us all. Because that would have made us like you used to be, Una replied. We fought to survive, not to become predators ourselves. The freed species of the former Calric's empire formed the Allied Worlds Council. Humans joined as founding members along with dozens of species who had suffered under Calric's rule. The organization wasn't perfect, but it was built on cooperation instead of conquest. The first council meeting was chaotic. Species who had been enemies under Calric's rule now had to work together. Arguments broke out. Old grudges surfaced, but they talked through problems instead of fighting. Admiral Hana retired from military service to become humanity's representative on the council. She spent her days negotiating treaties and resolving disputes. I spent my career preparing for war, she told a reporter. Now I get to build something better. This work is harder but more important. Captain Minho was promoted to Admiral and took command of Earth's Explorer Corps. His mission was making contact with new civilizations before conflict became inevitable. Lieutenant Ara became his first officer. Together they traveled the galaxy, always approaching new species with open hands instead of weapons. We're not here to conquer, Minho would say to new contacts. We're here to understand and cooperate. Not everyone believed him. Humanity's reputation as the species that defeated the Calrics made some aliens nervous, but slowly new alliances formed. On Earth, memorials honored those who died in the war. The largest memorial stood at the New Dawn launch site. 30,000 names carved in black stone, remembering the civilians whose death started everything. The war had changed humanity forever. They proved themselves capable of defeating impossible odds, but they also proved themselves capable of mercy when vengeance would have been easier. Years later, historians would debate whether humanity won through tactics, technology, or determination. But those who fought knew the real answer. Humanity won because they refused to be prey, and they refused to become predators. 3 years had passed since the Treaty of Sol changed the galaxy forever. The Calrix Empire existed only in history now. In its place were dozens of independent Calrix worlds, each choosing its own path forward. Threxel stood in a classroom on one of the reformed Calrix worlds. The room held both Calrix and human children sitting together, something impossible just years ago. He was teaching them about the war and what it meant. "Why did we lose?" a young Calrix student asked. Threxel thought carefully before answering. "We lost because we thought being strong meant dominating others. We forgot that true strength is adapting to survive. Humanity showed us that the most dangerous species isn't the strongest. It's the one that refuses to quit." A human child raised her hand. "My mother says you were in the war." "On the Calrix side, I was," Threxel admitted. "I believed what I was taught, that we were superior because we were predators. It took losing a war to learn I was wrong. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most important." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. The war had forced every species to reconsider what they knew about power and survival. On Earth, former Supreme Fleet Commander Vrextal sat in his prison cell. Few people visited him, but today a human journalist named Minji came to interview him for a book about the war. "Do you regret attacking humanity?" she asked. Vrextal was quiet for a long time. "I regret losing. I regret the shame my people suffered. But the attack itself? We were following our nature as predators." "Your nature was to conquer," Minji said. "Our nature was to survive." "Which one won?" "Yours did," Vrextal admitted. "You shouldn't have. By every measure, we should have crushed you in weeks. But you refused to fight our way. You adapted. You endured. You turned our pride into weakness. So you learned something?" Vrextal's laugh was bitter. "I learned that being apex predator means nothing if you can't adapt. Your species should have been easy prey. Instead, you became the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because you're strongest, but because you never quit." On New Sol, reconstruction was nearly complete. Sergeant Tay had opened a small restaurant serving both human and Calrix food. The young Calrix soldier who had apologized to him years ago now worked as his assistant. They had become something like friends. "Why did you hire me?" the Calrix asked one day. "I was part of the occupation." "Because you were willing to work for peace instead of holding on to hate," Tay replied. "That takes real courage." The restaurant became popular with both species. Humans and Calrix ate at neighboring tables, talking and sharing stories. They were building something new from the war's ashes. Dr. Nari had expanded her research beyond the Calrix. She now studied dozens of alien species, looking for ways to help them coexist peacefully. Her laboratory employed scientists from across the galaxy. "We spent so long studying how to fight each other," she told her team. "Now we study how to understand each other. This work is much better." Her current project helped Calrix adapt to low-gravity worlds. Many Calrix populations needed new homes as their empire fragmented. Nari's research made survival possible in environments that would have killed them before. Admiral Hana worked at the Allied Worlds Council, building frameworks for galactic peace. It wasn't easy. Species who suffered under Calrix rule wanted revenge. Calrix who resented defeat wanted to rebuild military power. Human colonies demanded protection from future threats, but Hana navigated these conflicts with patience. "We fought a war because the Calrix believed might makes right," she told the council during a difficult session. "If we believe the same now, we learned nothing." Her words carried weight. Humanity had proven they could fight, but they chose to build instead. Other species followed that example. Admiral Minho and Lieutenant Ara traveled unexplored space, making first contact with new civilizations. Their ship carried diplomats instead of weapons. Well, mostly, Minho had learned the value of being prepared. They encountered the Valdrix, a warlike species controlling a small empire. When the Valdrix learned humanity defeated the Calrix, they immediately suggested an alliance for conquest. "We could control this sector together," the Valdrix commander said. Minho shook his head. "We're not interested in controlling anything. We want peaceful coexistence, but you defeated the Calrix. You could rule the galaxy." "We could," Minho agreed, "but we don't want to. We fought because we were attacked, not because we wanted power." The Valdrix didn't understand at first, but they watched humanity carefully and slowly learned that strength didn't require conquest. Other predator species made similar calculations. The Rexan hierarchy withdrew from disputed space. The Crystalline Collective sent diplomats instead of warriors. Word spread across the galaxy that humanity was dangerous not because they wanted to rule, but because they couldn't be ruled. On Earth, Children learned about the war as history. They studied the tactics that won battles and the choices that won peace. The lesson was clear. Survival came from adaptation, not domination. In one classroom, a teacher named Gina taught young students about the war. A child asked the question every generation would ask: are humans predators or prey? Gina thought about all the people who fought and survived, about Captain Minho offering mercy, about Admiral Hana building traps and then building peace, about Sergeant Tay helping former enemies rebuild, about Dr. Nari studying aliens to help them instead of harm them. We're whatever we need to be, she answered. When threatened, we fight. When peace is possible, we build. That's what makes us human. Outside the classroom, ships from dozens of species traveled peacefully through Earth's orbit. Calrix traders, Valdrix diplomats, species humanity hadn't known existed 3 years ago. The memorial for the new dawn stood in the capital. 30,000 names carved in stone. People visited daily, remembering what was lost and why they fought. Next to it, a new monument honored the peace. It listed names of every human and alien who worked to build cooperation from conflict's ashes. Admiral Hana gave a speech at the Peace Memorial dedication. People from across the galaxy attended, watching human and Calrix leaders stand together. 3 years ago, the Calrix thought they were untouchable, Hana said. They learned otherwise, but we also learned something important. Winning the war was easier than building the peace. Peace requires us to be more than predators or prey. It requires us to be something better. She gestured at the crowd where humans and Calrix and dozens of species stood together. This is what we're building. Not an empire, not a dominion, just a galaxy where different species can exist without destroying each other. High above Earth, Admiral Minho's ship prepared for its next mission. They would travel to uncharted space, looking for new civilizations and new opportunities for cooperation. The galaxy was vast and humanity had barely begun exploring it. Ready when you are, Admiral, Ara reported. Minho looked at the stars ahead. Somewhere where species humanity hadn't met yet. Some would be peaceful. Others might be threats. But humanity was ready. Let's go, he said. We have a galaxy to explore. The ship jumped into faster-than-light travel, carrying humanity's message to the stars. We survived because we refused to be prey, and we thrived because we chose to build instead of conquer. The age of the apex predator was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and humanity, once facing extinction, now helped lead the galaxy toward a better future.